Congratulations to Barry and to CATA and to Bill and iCanada and all the other folks that have been here to participate today. You couldn't add much more content in the day in terms of the right kinds of messages. I think the first thing that I think we saw was leadership. Leadership required, leadership from certainly Peter and the ING folks, certainly the social media thing. I was taking notes, even though I'll have to tweet about it. It's probably rather than taking notes. The second is that Premier Aylward, no question New Brunswick is being led in a very comprehensive and forthright way, and that was echoed by Brad and all the mayors that stepped up and said, here's what leadership looks like, and here are some best practices of leadership that we can all take away. But I'd say that it's leadership in a community, but I'd also offer that it's individual leadership. So it was very obvious to us to listen and to understand that this took individual leadership, taking a little bit of a forward step, and it's a complicated thing in these cities, there's no doubt about it. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then we heard a little more about best practices, but some informational things, educational things about infrastructure, better definitions about that big broadband term and what that really meant. Alberta did a fantastic job on that, and so did BC. And I think we can learn a lot more about that. And then the first responder. And I loved at the end that we ended with the open data concept, because that will flow in a little bit in a couple of comments that I'll make. So if we just move a page here. Clearly what we're all talking about, and we could all say these are pictures of places in Canada, but let's be honest, these are places around the world where this theme of a community coming together and leading, knowing one another around the community, but deciding that it is it's competitive in some way, because knowledge workers, for one, are moving around the world. Jobs are moving around the world. You owe it to your constituents to make sure that you're building the best community that you can. And that was the driving theme that Bill started and has been really pressing with the rest of the iCanada team. And this is something that we saw from the leaders. This is all about increasing prosperity in their community. It's more or less, but nothing more or less than that. In the next page, however, we're in troubled times. So if we were looking at challenges and the opportunities here, and then if we look at you might see this depiction from us at IBM about what it takes to be a smarter city, which brings that planet down to its own size. But when you look at it, it's really about a combination of systems. It's not just one thing. It's certainly not just the municipal leader. It has to do with all of the things that come around that hub, if you will, of the major areas that are involved in the cities around the world. And you have to take a comprehensive approach. You just deal with one issue, you're not going to be able to really lift all boats in that community. And so it does take quite a bit of doing, and in fact, looking against these challenges of declining tax revenue, infrastructure that's not up to date. We heard a lot about that. And the population growth, Barry just talked about that we're going to see, that urban populations, it won't be that the rural populations are draining. It's just that the growth in the populations to come are going to continue to go into urban spaces. That's where they find the services that they need, and that's where they choose to live. And it's just, there's no demographic study that we've seen that says that's going to change. It's just that we don't have any new infrastructure to add, so we've got to be smarter about how we do it. And that's the theme. So if you take it as an opportunity, you can do some things here to make a difference. I'll give you a couple of examples, and since Mark was up doing P projects, I'll tell you about two that Bill just talked about that I'm involved in. So one is here, we just announced a month ago that here, just in the Eastern Townships outside of Montreal, we built Microelectronics Innovation Center. This was on a competition around the world. There's really no right for us to have a large microelectronics site here in Canada, but we do. And in fact, it's not just doing old technology that's going to go away. It's in fact on leadership technology, not only for our company's technology, but for the technology in gaming devices, the technology that's going into smart systems around the world. And in order to stay in that train and move ahead on that train, we've put an innovation center together that will look at nanotechnologies 5 years from now, along with Teledyne Delsa, by the way, from Waterloo, and University of Sherbrooke. So you can see the P part here, and the governments have been involved with this as well. About April of this year, we announced a large project in Ontario, and this one was one on R&D as well, a little bit around the themes that you'll see here, but we decided that Canada could lead on freshwater technology, on sustainable energy, on healthcare, and on cities. Why? Because we collaborate better than our peers around the world. I had to make the case. I know the case very well. I made it very well within the corporation to say that that needed to happen. And of course, I had to get partnerships with a couple of levels of government during their election time and after, and 7 universities, seven of the major universities in Ontario. And I will say that very openly because we're going to open it up to the others once we're finished or completed. But we're now 10 projects deep. We have proposals for 25 new projects on all kinds of leadership things that will lead the world from here in Canada. And I just say that in a case of saying this is the real theme that we're on, is that we need to decide that Canadians can lead and that we should lead. There's no reason for us to step back. In fact, I used to make speeches. I came in the taxi this morning with Yuri, and I said, yeah, I used to make speeches that said, we should do something about this. And then I think Bill was the guy who coined the phrase, and I've probably quoted it many times, except when he's on stage with me, where it says, look, let's not wait for governments to do things. Let's start a parade, and everybody will follow. And I think that's the theme that really resonates, and I think that's what we're trying to do. So last thing that I'll say is that it was referred to at the very early part of today that there's going to be another Olympics of IT, and of course IBM's somewhat involved with this WCIT event. We did a big innovation jam over the summer. Barry and I were on the same thing. And in fact, I was trying to run one of the things around a smart city question because it became a topic that people wanted to hear about. So I made sure John Longbottom was on my jam. I made sure Barry, when he came on, was on my jam. We had people from all kinds of countries, and I had to do it 3 days in a row for a good, it started to be 45 minutes, but it turned into an hour and a half because people were so animated about the topic. And I just want to read to you, by the way, they were on healthcare, they were on skills. These are the kinds of things that people wanted to jam on around the world. But smart cities and transportation made it to one of the top topics that all IT industries around the world want to talk about. And let me give you a couple of the things. This is pre-announced just for this group because it's going to happen in the next 3 days. And since this is a smart cities thing, I can do this. First is, and just why I'm doing this is because it resonates with all the themes today. Number one is making sure that we have access. Everybody has access, equal access. That's important. You can't talk about being smart unless you can, all be there together. Second is that the technology has to be easy to adapt. Obviously examples like the playbook, I should just keep going with Canadian examples, are very great. They're easy to use. They're very straightforward, but people need the easy adoption to make these things work. Interesting, one of the things that hasn't come up today, but is a big topic around urban areas, is transportation and commuting. It is for me, certainly every day. And so one of the bigger topics was, people have to think of new paradigms about whether you really have to go to the office. Shouldn't we just telecommute? If you don't telecommute, are there better ways to understand the information that's out there to know, like the BlackBerry traffic app that I use all the time that tells me where the traffic is going to be in front of you? And then finally, and it's interesting that we landed on this topic of the open data and the iCatalog sources in cities, but open data is one of the most powerful areas that leverages what signifies a progressive and a smart city. Do you have the information available to you like many do in Canada, and we just heard that presentation. So there are a lot of people posting lots of great information. Their constituents are learning quite a bit about what's going on in their city, and they're able to take their own action on doing the right thing, making choices, and being progressive in how they go forward. So I think that's a nice way of kind of encapsulating the leaders from the world of IT that comes together are going to be looking at smart cities and some of these topical areas and trying to drive out further solutions. But I mean, this group really is the center of the universe for the smart cities, and I think you should be thinking about some of those topics as the ones that are also coming from a worldwide audience that's just about to embark. So my last slide is to say this, and in fact, it was set up before we even got here today, is to say this is all about using information to make the right choices. It's not necessarily an investment in new infrastructure. It may just be taking the information that you have available to you and using it in a better way. It's certainly to look at predictive problem solving. It's not just taking, looking at the old way of doing things. You're going to have to think of new ways of doing things in order to be winning in the new world. And then coordinating your resources to operate effectively. You won't get more money necessarily in a huge way. It has to be very cost effective in how we approach it. And the final point is, this is a global problem. This is a very a significant global problem that most leaders in urban areas around the world are thinking about, as we've seen in many of the people here are traveling around the world with the expertise that we have. But if we can solve some of these issues here in Canada with the leadership that we have here in this room, then we can take these lessons and take them around the world. So thank you very much for the day. It's been an excellent day, and I really appreciate being a part. Thank you.